Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm going to be telling you about my review of Richard Linklater's film that's based off of a book called Fast Food Nation, which is also the name of the book. Fast Food Nation is a book that kind of shows the dark side, talks about the dark side of the fast food industry. And Richard Linklater's film, which I'm going to review for you today, is a film adaptation of the book. But what's kind of interesting about this film adaptation is it's a feature film, but they took material from the book, such as the dark side of the film industry, the fast food industry once again, and they've incorporated it into a story that Richard Linklater and the author of the book decided to team up for and write a script about. And so basically, it's the author's work mixed into Richard Linklater's story, which is the true facts about the dark side of the fast food industry. And so it's kind of a interesting film adaptation in a sense because it's kind of a little bit of both sides, both a book about truth and a story written by Richard Linklater, which incorporates that truth into it. So in Fast Food Nation, you guys, for the most part, this film is about a fast food chain. Had to adjust the camera there. A fast food restaurant chain representative, played by Greg Kinnear, and he was in As Good as It Gets, and he was in a couple of other stuff, and he, like I said, he's a representative, and he learns from one of his board members, I would say, not really his boss, but probably one of the board members that he is associated with, that there's been some contamination issues with one of the meat products that's one of the newer products and one of the bigger products of this restaurant that he works for, and that he has to go down to the meat packing industry where that distributes the meat for these restaurants all over the world and all over the country. So basically, he has to see, what's going on. Why is this meat being contaminated? Why is it being distributed still? Why isn't the FDA not getting on them about this? Why are they still okay with them selling this kind of meat to the general public? So basically, throughout his story of the film, because this film was actually a little bit of many stories, and so for the most part, the most of the film is about this, but there's other side stories which I'll get here into in a second. But yes, for the most part, for Greg Kinnear's story, it's about him finding a way to kind of get rid of this contamination so that way the meat can be clean again and the chain can be ran just like it was before this contamination issue got brought up. And then for the other stories, we have a story involving some newly hired employees to the meatpacking factory that Greg Kinnear, later travels to in the movie, and we get to see kind of the dark side of the fast food industry. We get to see what happens to the cows, how they're treated, how the beef gets made. How the cows get killed, and basically it's PETA's worst nightmare. And PETA is this company that is against like animal cruelty and things like that. So there's a scene in this movie that's very much PETA. It'd be PETA's worst nightmare if they saw it in real life. Um, and so it's about this this, I would say, a girl mostly for the most part, who gets hired into it. We get to see the dark side of the company, and we kind of get to see the side that Greg Kinnear's character didn't get to see. And it was kind of cool how that played out, but at the same time it was also very depressing and dark to see that side play out as well. And then we also get to see somebody who actually works for this restaurant. She's like a teenage girl in high school about to go off to college, and kind of how when she slowly finds out about the dark side of this fast food industry, she kind of wants out from this restaurant job. So for Fast Food Nation, you guys, I thought it was a good film. I think it was good. It's not great. And the reason why I say it's good and not great is because some of these stories, like Greg Kinnear's half of the story, the story involving this girl who worked for the restaurant, found out some of the dark secrets about the company, and kind of wanted out of the business after that. That stuff was fine, but for me, actually, the factory story portion of the film, where we get to see this lady from Mexico wanting work in the U.S., and something happens to the boyfriend that she has, and something, there's this love affair going on with one of the coworkers at work, and I thought that story was really uninteresting, and I understood that that story was there to kind of show the message of the film and showing the dark side of the fast food company because those scenes specifically were definitely the darker scenes of the movie. I would say I understood why they were there, but I think Richard Linklater, who I'm pretty sure wrote basically the stories for this movie, and the author of the book got to do all the factual stuff for the movie. I thought Richard Linklater could have done a better story for that one. Just the overall factory story just wasn't very interesting to me. Maybe they just could have done, I don't know, maybe just one of the employees and we got to see their regular day. Maybe it would just could have shown, just how depressing the job is and that, they get paid little and they have to do everything and they're worked to death and some of those ideas I just shared are in the story, but I felt like I said Richard Linklater's factory story portion of the movie just could have had a more interesting story. So that was kind of my small take on it. But here's my positives and negatives of the overall Fast Food Nation movie. My number one positive with the movie is Greg Kinnear's story. I thought was the most interesting. I like how we can kind of connect with him. He's not he's kind of oblivious to what's really going on with the company. He, just like everybody else, he thinks that this is clean, 100% pure beef. That nothing's wrong with it. Just like the general public would see it. It's clean meat. It's a clean restaurant. It's served well. It's cooked well. So he's kind of the customer viewpoint of the company, and it was kind of interesting to see somebody who is a big executive of the company get to see the dark side of the industry. I thought that was very interesting, and we learn about the industry just as quickly as Greg Kinnear's character does. And I thought that was very well executed from Richard Linklater. So huge thumbs up there. I also like how the film shows the dark side of the fast food industry. Don't get me wrong; it's not entertaining, but it's definitely trying to show you basically what's really going on behind the scenes in some of these fast food restaurants. Um, I thought the film just it did a very good job showing that dark side of the fast food industry, even though it's not the easiest thing to watch. Another huge positive I had about the film is you could definitely tell Richard Linklater worked on it because there's a lot of throwbacks to his other films that he's worked on, with Before Sunrise and Dazed and Confused, and even later on with Boyhood, which actually, ironically enough, has some of the stars from that movie in this movie. And, Boyhood is one of Richard Linklater's more recent films. But I liked how there was a nice throwback to a lot of Richard Linklater's other stuff. Ethan Hawke's in the film, Patricia Arquette's in the film. The lead character, I think his name is Ellar Coltrane, who played the lead character in Boyhood. He's in this film. Um, just a lot of people who worked with Richard Linklater in the past and more recently are in this film. And it was just kind of a nice little throwback because a lot of these characters that we see throughout the movie very much are in the same vein as those other characters that they've played in other Richard Linklater films. So I thought that was kind of a nice little Richard Linklater stamp touch to the movie. The film also does a good job showing the desperation of humanity, kind of how people will do almost anything for money. It's the dollar before the public health for some of the stuff. Um, Bruce Willis's character is definitely that side of the story. There's something going on with his character that you'll see when you watch the film that very much is about, as long as we make money, as long as people aren't complaining, as long as people enjoy the product, who's to say that I can't make money off of this product and things like that. And it's just kind of the dark truth of the situation. And once again, it shows the desperation of humanity and how we kind of put the dollar before public health first in some situations. And it's just kind of a little sad truth that Richard Linklater, I thought, explored very well in this movie. And then for my negative, since I did bring it up earlier, and I'll bring it up again because it is a pretty big negative for me for this movie, I really think the factory story portion of the film was the most uninteresting. And that's saying a lot because, like I said, the Greg Kinnear story, the girl who works for the restaurant, that story was fine. And like I said, the Greg Kinnear story was fine. But the factory story really needed some work. I think it could have been completely rewritten. I thought the whole thing with the love affair with the other coworker was completely unnecessary. Um, I think they could have, like I said, maybe just show just how dark and depressing and kind of how difficult of a job it would be to maintain in your regular life. I think something as simple as that could have been done for this movie, and I think they tried to make it something bigger than it should have been. because, like I said, what was really used here for that factory story I thought was really uninteresting. And then, even though I love Greg Kinnear's story in this film, I thought it needed a better wrap up. It does wrap up, in the post end credits, but it doesn't wrap up as well as I wanted it to. It very much, they definitely could have done something more with it. I think the overall message behind Greg Kinnear's portion of the story wasn't really given justice at the end of the movie, because either, by the end of the movie, he either would have quit, or, maybe he could have stood up and, kind of taken the public's eye approach to some of this stuff, because basically Linklater doesn't approach it. The film's already over with by the time his character could have done something with, what he learned in the movie and things like that. But I felt Greg Kinnear's story could have used a better wrap up. And then my last complaint with Fast Food Nation was I thought there was a lot of unnecessary content. Um, Even in the Greg Kinnear story, once again, because I like that story a lot. I thought there was just a lot of unnecessary scenes, just a lot of unnecessary, um, plotting with, like, oh, well, this is happening while this is going on, and this is also happening while this is going on, and this is also happening while this is going on, and just a lot of stuff we didn't need, just a lot of unnecessary fluff that just so happened to be added to a story that was already fine. So overall, guys, I'm going to give Fast Food Nation an 8 out of 10. It does have a lot to say about the dark side of the fast food industry. Richard Linklater, for the most part, does have an interesting story going on here, but there's just a lot of unnecessary content that I didn't need. The factory story, like I said, could have been completely rewritten. The way it was written, I thought, was really uninteresting. And then I thought Greg Kinnear's story in this film could have used a better wrap up, because it didn't really wrap up too well, in my opinion. But like I said, 8 out of 10. The film does have a lot to say. It does have a strong message, but there's a lot of things going against it that prevent it from being what could have been a great Richard Linklater classic film. So, Fast Food Nation, if you haven't seen it yet, if you want to see a film that kind of shows the dark side of the fast food industry, go ahead and watch it, but you don't have to own it. I don't think it's that necessary of a viewing, but give Fast Food Nation a try. If you like Richard Linklater, if you like films that have a lot to say about, the general public and things like that, give it a view. It's pretty good.